Hey guys, okay, so in this lesson we're going to learn about rendering our scene. So rendering is basically taking what you see in your viewport and letting the computer calculate the cameras and the lighting like in a realistic way and spit out, your final images that you would use in your animation or your film or your still image or whatever you're generating. So we have our models here. We have our bottle, mug, and our little potted plant. I deleted the dirt because there was just like that cylinder in there, and we want to make some more interesting looking dirt. And we have like this kind of rectangle thing that we're going to use to like duplicate and make like a tabletop out of planks. So let's go ahead and do that first. So just select this plank and go up to edit and go to not duplicate, but duplicate special, and don't click there yet, but there's a little square next to it because these little squares are to set options. So we're gonna go ahead and click on that little square to set the options for our duplicate special. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna change, yours is probably set to 1, this number of copies. We want 10 of these, or 10 more of these, we'll end up with 11. And then if we want to figure out which way we want to duplicate and offset the duplicates. So we want them to kind of move this way. And if I look down at the bottom left corner of my screen, I have this little indicator of directions. So this is the X direction, is the red one. It might be hard to see. And if you don't see that little indicator down there, it's because it's probably turned off. So you just go on the top of your viewport, you click on show, and then you go down to HUD, which stands for heads up display. So you turn that off, it's gone. Go back to show, turn on heads up display, it comes back, and yeah, that's just your indicator. So we need to go in the X direction. So in Maya, they use the word translate for moving. So we want to move it in the X direction. So this first box is X, then there's Y, and then there's Z. There's also rotation and scale, but we don't want to mess with those. So I already have mine set, but yeah, just type in 1.8. Let's go ahead and type in a bigger number. Let's type in 3 and hit apply. And you can see it duplicates and moves each duplicate 3 units in the X direction. So it's just like a quick way to get a repetitive task done. But these are too far apart, obviously. So let's undo that. I'll hit the Z key. And let's change that. I found 1.8 to be a good number for this. So you just kind of feel around and get to a good number. If it's too big, you undo it. If it's too small, you undo it. And you just adjust accordingly. Hit apply. So I think this looks pretty good. Let me just do something real quick. I want to show you how to group these. So I'm just going to ungroup them for a second. Oops. Parent these. You don't have to do this part because you won't have yours grouped together. So yours will look like this. So again, this is the outliner. If you don't have the outliner, for whatever reason you don't have it, just go up to Windows, Outliner, and it'll pop up as a separate window. And if you want to dock it, I'm going to drag it with my mouse over, and this line will start to turn blue. So like wherever you click it with your mouse and you start to drag it over, when your mouse hits that area, you see it turns blue, then you let go. So now you have your outliner up. So what you could do is you could select, click this first plank, and then just go down to the bottom one here, hold down Shift, click this one, and it selects all of them. Same thing as you could just drag a box around them here. Same thing, and then just go to either edit and then group, or just hit Control G. So let's use the hotkey, which is Control G. And what that does is it makes a new transform. The pivot point for that transform is going to be at the origin of the scene, right in the middle of the grid, and there's no name for it. Think of this as like a folder that you put all your planks into, and if you want to move that folder, everything that's in it goes with it. So let's rename this table. So you double click that, name it table, and then you can use this little minus sign to kind of collapse that. So you don't have to see all those planks at once in the outliner. All right, so now we have our basic scene. Now we want to get a lighting source, and we could go ahead and render it. So there's different lights. So like if you, at the very top of Maya, there's this area called the shelf. And there's different tabs. There's like sculpting tools, there's rigging tools, animation tools. We want to go to the tab that says Arnold. Arnold is the renderer that ships with Maya. I think you can look it up online, but I believe Sony Pictures Imageworks developed the renderer Arnold and then sold it to Autodesk. That's why they call it Arnold and not just like the Maya renderer. Maya has its own renderer that's not as good, but we're going to use Arnold for this. It's like a little plugin that comes with Maya. So there's different lights you can use. There's like an area light. I think this is a mesh light. We're not going to worry about these first three right now. We're going to click this fourth one, which is a sky dome light. And what this does is it creates, if I could even zoom out super far and you could see it, but it creates like this giant sphere around our scene. And think of this giant sphere as like emitting light inwardly. So there's light coming from every direction. So I'll zoom back in. And then we could go ahead, oops, I just did something there. Let me undo that. We could go ahead and just kind of, frame our scene in a nice little way. And under the Arnold tab, there's this little render button. It's the last one. It looks like a piece of film with a play button on it. If you click that, a window will pop up. Ignore what you see here, and it takes a few seconds, and it should render what you have. This is strange. So there's a little progress bar at the bottom. Why is it not updating? Interesting. Me close this. I'm just going to save my scene. So Control S. I'm going to reopen it. Actually, let me quit Maya. Sometimes Maya just bugs out. There's my Photoshop. Let's launch Maya again. Come on, Maya. Boom. All right, we got it back. Let me close this hypershade. So I'm just going to go to File, Open, and open my scene again. It was this render scene. Oh, and I forgot, before I continue, we need to set our project to that week 4 folder. So you just go to File, Set Project, and yours would be on the thumb drive. Mine is in my Intro to CG folder. I'm just going to click on week 4, hit Set. So now when I open scenes or load in textures or images, it automatically knows to look in that folder. Okay, so we have our sky dome light that we just added. And like I said, it's like a light source emitting inward, so there's light coming from every direction, whatever's inside of this. So now if I hit that little play button, which is the render button, it quickly renders this scene. And it looks pretty cool because we have it's almost like, think of it as like an overcast sky where there's no harsh shadows, but there's this kind of real soft shadowy look. That's called global illumination. So there's light coming from everywhere, and there's light bouncing between objects, and there's these soft shadows, which is ambient occlusion. That's like the ambient light being occluded in these little crevices and things like that. It just makes it look really realistic. But right now everything looks kind of primer gray. So we're going to want to, we're going to want to add a background image so we get some more natural lighting. And then we'll start to add some different materials to these objects. So let's do that. So you can leave your render view open. Your middle mouse button will zoom on the image. I mean, if you zoom too far, it's just pixels. It's just blowing up the image. And then same as the Alt and middle mouse can pan it around. And if you change your viewport, like if you tumble in your viewport, it'll tumble in here, and you can see it gets pixelated. That's because Maya has to update the render, and then it'll turn solid again. All right, so let's open up the, let's see. First thing, let's add a image to this background. So instead of just this color of white that's being lit up to light the scene, let's actually use an image, and then it'll use the colors from the image to light the scene. So if you have a bright sun in your image, there'll be a bright sun in your scene. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on that sky dome. So like if I go to wireframe and deselect it, and that's hitting 4 on my keyboard, and hit 5 to get shaded again. I don't have that sky dome selected. I can either select it in my outliner, or I could just click on it in the viewport to select it. And you can see it's wireframe. So then hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor. And if you don't see the same thing here, yours might be on the sky dome light. So this is the transform, this tab here. This has your positioning and rotation and scale information. You want to actually go to the sky dome shape, which has all the color and the intensity and all those things. So you could, if we change the color of this to like teal or something, now we're using like a teal light to light our scene. But we actually want to add an image. So the way we do that is we click on this little checkerboard next to this color section here. Then it's saying, okay, what do we want to control that color with? There's like a checkerboard pattern, there's a fractal noise, there's a grid, there's all these different noises and things. We're actually going to use a file, an image file. So we're going to click on File. Now in our attribute editor, we have that file node that we're going to need to tell it which image to look at. So you click on this little folder. And then I'm going to pick Studio Garden 4K.exr. That's the one I'm going to click on. So you can see in the image we have this bright sun, and we have some shadows, and we have some grass and trees and a blue sky. So we have a variation of different colors and lights we're going to get from that. So let's go ahead and hit open. So now in our render view, that totally changes everything. We got this cool image in the background. We have this, a harsher light source with it being the sun. We have these sharper shadows, but even in the shadows, we get a little bit of a blue from that sky, and the shadows just aren't black. So we get pretty cool lighting just out the gate using an image. That's pretty much the way I tend to light. It seems like the easiest, fastest way. There's more advanced techniques with like using the lights themselves and like creating studio lighting and things like that. But there's even images, and you could look online for like a studio image that was taken with a 360-degree camera, and you can map it onto your sky dome light, and it can actually get studio lighting using this setup as well. So I really like the sky dome setup. All right, so let's actually make some materials for our different objects in here. So I'm going to close the attribute editor, and we're going to open up something called the hypershade. So we go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. So this has a few different viewports in it. At the top left, we get to see all the materials, and there's little tabs. We can see there's our one file texture. These other things, if you had lights in the scene, we see our sky dome. But I'm going to click back on materials, and we have these are my default materials, and this default gray material is what's on everything in our scene right now. That's why it looks kind of like this primer gray color. But we're going to go ahead and create a new material, and we have this view down here. This is our work area. You could zoom in, you could alt middle mouse and pan. If I zoom in, there's our sky dome shape. If I hit this little sparkle box, the fourth button over button, it clears this work area, but it's not deleting our sky dome. This is just where we could bring things to work on them and then clear it, and it's not actually deleting stuff. If I click on lights up here, our sky dome is still there. And if I were to middle mouse drag this back to here, then we could work on it again. We could hit clear again if we don't want to see that. So again, go back to materials, and if you right click in this area down here, our little work area, right click in here and go create node, and I want to create an Arnold material. So I click on Arnold, and then onto the right, we're going to scroll down this list, and we want to see AI standard surface. That's the material you're going to use 90% for everything. I don't know why they put it so far down the list, but I guess it's just alphabetical order. So we want to create this material. So when we click that, it pops up in our work area. So now I can zoom out. You can zoom in, zoom out, middle mouse wheel. And here's our AI standard surface. We can close this create window now. We don't need it. And now we have options for our surface. And if we want to assign this surface to one of the objects in our scene, so let's go ahead and, I'm just going to move this out of the way. Let's pick our bottle. And let's right click on this and click assign material to viewport selection. So now in the render view, you can see this is a little bit more of a bright white. It has some reflections on it. That's that new material. If you had trouble doing that, sometimes if you click on an object and then you just middle mouse zoom in here, then you can right click and go assign material to viewport selection. So now that we have this assigned to our bottle, if we actually start changing the colors of this material, like if I go to select this, and on the right, this is pretty much the attribute editor over here. If I click on color and select like a dark blue, now that changes the color of that bottle because this is the material that we have assigned to this bottle. And a material is like the shader. This is like the little mini program that tells Maya how to make this bottle appear, how light interacts with it. And a cool thing is you can see this blue is now bouncing onto our flower pot thing. So we get some really realistic rendering using this Arnold render engine. So another cool thing is if you have your standard surface selected and then you go up to presets over here next to the top, click on presets, we could actually pick different, we could pick chrome, and it's asking us if we want to replace the current texture or the current material or blend it like 90%. Let's go ahead and just hit replace. Now we got a chrome bottle, and you can see it's reflecting the sky and the table and all cool stuff. If we try a different one, we could go to copper, go to replace. Now we got this cool like rougher copper material, so it's pretty neat. Good way to start out, and you could customize these even further. But let's go back to presets and select glass. So there's glass, go to replace. So now we have our glass bottle. It's like refracting the table behind it. We're getting some reflections on there. That's pretty neat. And we want to rename this material as glass. So I'm going to just double click here. And you know, if that, you have to have this selected, double click in here and call this glass underscore surface. You can name yours whatever you want. The name's not important. It's just, I like to have the word surface after because we might have a piece of geometry in the scene with the name glass, and I don't want to have conflicting names. So I put surface after it, hit enter. So now we see glass surface here, and then up top here in materials, we see our glass surface as well. So if I were to clear my work area by hitting this little sparkle button, I can middle mouse drag the glass surface back in there, and we could look at, we could hook different things up to these. We'll get into that in a minute, but it's just an easy way to deal with it. So next, let's go ahead and do our mug. So let's create, we could hit that clear button, right click, go create node, click on Arnold, scroll down to AI standard surface. And then we could go ahead and pick our standard surface and then go to presets, and there's a ceramic preset, hit replace. Now I want to select my mug, so I could do that right here in the outliner. I got my outliner right there, just click on mug so I have it selected. Go in here and right click and go to assign material to viewport selection. So now you can see we have the ceramic material on here. I'm just going to leave mine white. You could change the color. If you click on your AI standard surface, you have to click that first, then go to color. Then you could change it to a yellow mug, or any variation on the color wheel that you pick. But I'm just going to leave mine as white because I'm boring. All right, let's name this ceramic surface. So double click it here, or you could double click it up here and do ceramic underscore surface. Let's go ahead and save our scene. So just hit Control S. So, we don't lose all that work we've done. Let's do clay for the clay pot. So let's clear our little work area. Right click, go to create. I got 2 create windows up here. I could close one. It leaves it open. It's kind of weird. Again, click on Arnold. There's the AI standard surface. Click on that. I guess we could just leave this open here. That'll be cool. All right, so we'll leave that open. Click on this AI standard surface, and let's go to presets. There's one for clay, and hit replace. Now we could select our pot. So I'm just going to move this out of the way so I can select the pot. Bring this back up, right click on this AI standard surface. So now it's not letting me right click on it. So I just have to zoom with my middle mouse button. Now I can right click and go assign material to viewport selection. Now we have our red clay pot, but I don't like that color red. So I'm going to click on this AI standard surface, and I want to change it to more of like a duller, like baseball field kind of color. So I'm just going to kind of lower the saturation a bit. Maybe brighten it up a little bit. Maybe lower that saturation even further. I don't know. That seems more like, in my mind, like what a clay pot looks like, I guess. So let's double click on this name and change it to clay surface. All right, let's make a material for the table planks. So we could, if you don't clear this, it's fine. You can move these out of the way. If I go to create another AI standard surface, because I have this create node window still open, if I click that, it's just going to make it, and sometimes it covers it up so it gets confusing. But so let's just leave these both in here at the same time, just so you can see that you can move these things around, and you could kind of organize the workspace to look a little bit better by clicking and dragging these things. So let's click the second AI standard surface that we just made, and let's go to presets and let's pick something cool. Actually, let's pick a few different things. Let's just assign this. So let's pick the planks. So I'm going to pick that table group in my outliner. So that picks all the planks. If I move this, they're all selected. And I could right click on this AI standard surface and hit assign material to viewport selection. So now we just got that default white material. But if I have that selected, the AI standard surface selected, and then go to presets, let's try like frosted glass. I'm curious what that looks like. We click this bar up here to kind of bring that to the front. So it's kind of an interesting look. You can tell it's taking longer for Maya to render this because there's a lot more reflections and refractions and stuff going on. I think that's a cool look, but we kind of lose our bottle and stuff. So let's try a different material. So again, I'll go to presets. Let's go to, I think there is a brushed metal. Yeah, down towards the bottom. Third from the bottom, and hit replace. So it's kind of a different look, maybe like a brushed stainless steel table or something. I kind of like it. Let's leave it at that, and you could go back to your viewport and you could hold down Alt, left middle mouse, and kind of pan around and get different perspectives on that. Now let's do our leaves. So let's go to create it. Well, first let's rename this one to brushed metal. Brushed metal, let's say. Metal surface. We'll rename that so we don't lose that. Let's go ahead and hit Control S to save. And let's clear our workspace because we don't need it to be so cluttered. So we're going to hit that little sparkle button. And we're going to, I still have this create node window open. If I didn't, I would just right click in this view, go to create node, and it brings it back up. Click Arnold. Go to AI standard surface, which is right there. Click that and it creates a new surface, and I'll leave this open to make that easier. And whenever you click on the bar on the top of one of these windows, it brings it to the front. So we need something for these leaves. So let's select our plant. Actually, if I select the plant group, it's going to select the pot with it. So I'm just going to go to my outliner and hit the plus sign next to the plant so I can see all the leaves. And so I'm just going to click on this one, hold down shift and click down to, let's just go to the bottom. Now we have the pot selected. If we want to deselect the pot, hold down control and click that. Oops, that's not what you do. Let me try again. Hold down shift and select all of these. And I think you could just hit shift and deselect, or let me see, control, alt. Okay, if you go in the viewport and hold down control, you should be able to deselect it. Okay, that little minus. When I hold down control, that little minus pops up next to my arrow. So you could deselect it that way. So now I have all the leaves and the stem selected, but not the pot. And I could right click and assign this new material. So again, they're just white. Let's go ahead and, because I think, trying to think of what's similar to like the way a leaf looks. Now, like if I were to kind of pan and I want to see some shadows from the underside, we would expect to see like some translucency and stuff like that in these leaves, to have some of this lighting kind of come through the top, you know, because they're somewhat translucent when the bright light hits it. So right now we're just getting this reflection from the pot, which, you know, that's cool, but that's not what we want really. So let's pick that new surface. Let's go to presets, and I'm going to pick skin because, you know, it won't be the right color. We could change that, but I think skin has a bit of a translucency similar to a plant maybe. So let's click on replace. So now we have our leaves that have this like skin, and let's see if we're getting that effect. So like if I zoom in on that image, we can see we're seeing the shadow that's being cast on top of this leaf, and we're seeing the light kind of come through the leaf, which is really cool. We could lessen that effect if I go back to the hypershade, click on that surface. First, let's change the color from white to like a dark green. So you could click on green, drag this all the way over to green, and make it really dark, like a plant. And we're not seeing any updates here yet. That's because there's something else called subsurface scattering that's happening here. So if you think of your skin, or you think of a plant, if you were to shine a bright light on it, that light would kind of enter your skin and bounce around on the particles underneath the skin because it's somewhat translucent. That's what subsurface scattering is called. So there's a little tab here, if you click on your shader, called subsurface. We're going to click on that, and we're going to change these colors. So first, let's change the weight of the subsurface. Let's put it like at 0.5. Right now it's at 1. And now we can see we're seeing less of that light being transmitted from the top to the bottom. And I think that's pretty accurate. So let's go even lower. You know, I guess it depends what kind of leaf it is. Oops. You want to make sure you're in the subsurface, not the specular section. So subsurface, let's make it like 0.2 for the weight. And let's see what that looks like. I think that's getting a little bit better. But now we need to change these colors. So let's make this subsurface color like a green, but not as dark as our actual leaf green. So let's click on green and bring this all the way over. And then we're gonna make it dark, but not as dark as the other green that we assigned for the main color. So now we're starting to get somewhere. And same thing for this radius, maybe more of a yellowish green. And maybe a little bit darker on that. And I think that's getting pretty green. Like looking at the leaves that are in the background, I think we're matching pretty well. You know, we're still seeing some of these little facets, like the polygons that make up our leaf, but let me show you how to fix that. So if I select each leaf, this is kind of a pain in the butt because you have to do it for each one. But if I go to Control A to the attribute editor for that leaf and click on at the top these tabs, you want to click on the leaf shape. And then there's an Arnold tab here, a little arrow next to Arnold. Click that. We're going to scroll down and go to subdivision. And let's change this to the middle one, which is Cat Clark. And Ed Catmull, this is short for Catmull Clark, they developed this algorithm for smoothing geometry, and he was one of the founders of Pixar, actually. So click on Catmull Clark, and you can see as soon as we do that, those facets go away. And if we would have to do that on every leaf, so if you want to click on another leaf, it'll come up right in the same spot here, and just change that to Cat Clark, and you kind of go through each leaf and do that. You could do it for your pot too, like if you're seeing the facets on your pot, do that, Cat Clark. Actually, let's do it for the mug, because I know on the handle of the mug, let's zoom into the handle of the mug. You could see the facets on there, so let's click the mug, change that to Catmull Clark as well. So now it gets perfectly rounded. So what's happening is the render engine is actually running a mesh smooth on this, and we don't see it in the viewport, but it's happening at the time of render. So that's why we get to see. And let's do it on the bottle while we're at it. Click on the bottle, Catmull Clark. That just adds to the realism of the scene. But now it takes a little bit longer to render. All right, so let's kind of get back to where we can see the leaves. Make sure we're kind of happy with those. So I think it's looking pretty cool. So now we need that dirt. So let's go ahead and make the dirt for this thing. I'm going to close the render view right now because we need to model this dirt. So let's hit close for the render view. Let's close this shader create thing. Oh, we got to name this. Let's name this leaf surface. And let's hit save. So Control S to save. Don't want to lose our work. And I actually have a meeting I got to run to real quick, so I'm just going to pause this recording and I'll be back in a second. Hey guys, sorry about that. I just got out of a work meeting. All right, so we left off where we wanted to model in some dirt for this potted plant. So I'm going to, let's close the attribute editor. Let's close the hypershade. We just want to look at what we're dealing with here. So let's just make this, it's pretty easy. So I'm going to go to create, polygon primitives, and create a polygon plane, or just plane. That just creates a plane of polygons at the origin here. We could go ahead and just grab the move tool, the W key, and move it upward just so we could kind of see it a little bit better. Let's add some more subdivisions to this. So if you remember, you go in your channel box area and you could click on polyplane 2. Now, if you don't see the channel box, if this is detached and it's gone, you should be able to go to Windows, General Editors. Let's see here. Oops. Yeah, General Editors and Channel Control. Nope, that's not it. Let me go back. Windows, General Editors. Oh, it's the second one, Channel Box. So it might come up and it might be detached. And again, wherever you click this with your mouse in this top bar, I'm going to click it kind of towards this R. And then as my mouse gets towards the edge of the screen, I get this blue line and I let go and it attaches it to the viewport. So to get back to what we're doing, you have your polyplane selected. You click on this input, which is this polyplane 2, and that allows us to adjust. This is the construction history. We could adjust this. Let's do 30 by 30. Enter. So now we got a pretty dense little polyplane, so we can sculpt on it, but we need it to be a circle so it fits in this pot correctly. So we just go up to, where's it? Edit Mesh. And then the fourth one down is circularize. So you click that. Now it turns it into a circle. If I zoom on it, you can kind of see what it's doing there. It's kind of just spreading out the points and making them into a circle. I think this is fine for that. So we could just click our select tool again. Maybe click off of it, click back onto it. And let's delete the history on it. So let's go to, we don't need this polyplane and this polycircularize anymore. So we're just going to sculpt on this. We don't need Maya to have that information in memory. So we can just click that little polyplane, which is now a disk, and go to edit, delete by type, history. So now if I have this polyplane selected, there's no more inputs and Maya does not constantly evaluating those nodes, so it makes our scene run a little bit more efficiently. So let's grab our move tool, and there's two ways you could do this. You could just hit the scale tool, scale it up. You could move it, go to the move tool. Again, the scale tool is R, the move tool is W, and you could just move it into here and scale it and try to eyeball it. That's one way to do this. If you don't want to eyeball it, you could parent your plane, which let's rename this to dirt. Not dirter, but get rid of that extra R. And let's parent that dirt to this plant. So I'm going to click the dirt in my outliner, hold down Control, and then click the plant. So we're saying we want to parent the dirt to the plant, then hit the P key on the keyboard. Now this dirt is inside this plant hierarchy. And since it's inside that hierarchy, it's living within the coordinates of the plant transform, which is right here. So if I zero out this dirt for the translate, it's going to snap back to that plant origin, because that's what 0, 0, 0 for that dirt is now going to be. So if I click the dirt, go to the channel box, click all these translate XYZs, hit 0, enter. Now it snaps back to the bottom there. Then I just have to click my dirt and lift it up. And it's pretty centered, and I might need to just scale it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to hit the 4 on the keyboard to go to wireframe and make sure that it's kind of pressing into that pot, intersecting it a little bit. Hit 5 again to go back to shaded view. And then let's sculpt on this. Let's go up to our shelf and go to sculpting and click on this first little tool. This is like the bump. It says lift to surface. I call it like the bump tool. If you double click on it, the size of this thing by default, if I click on it, it's gonna be pretty big. So I'm gonna undo that, hit Z. You want your strength right here. If your strength is like, I think by default it's 15. So if I were to click this, it just like goes nuts, right? So I'm gonna undo that. Set your strength to like 0.2. And then there's a cool interactive way to set the brush size. It's kind of hard. There's like this black circle around the brush. You can kind of see it. If I hold down the B key, middle mouse drag left and right, I could change the size of my brush. So I want it to be around this size. Let go. And now when I paint, we could just paint like these little, bumps or whatever, you want to paint to just make your surface look a little bit uneven, since it is like a pile of dirt, maybe towards the edge a little bit. whatever suits your fancy here is all we need. So let's say that's good, right? We got our uneven, kind of bumpy dirt. And let's go back to our select tool. So hit the Q on the keyboard. So now we're back on the arrow, the select tool. So now we need to do a shader for this dirt. So let's, again, bring up our render view. So let's zoom in kind of on this dirt. And let's go back to the shelf, the Arnold render. Click that little render button that looks like the play button. And now we're going to get like an up close and personal rendering of that dirt. So now, it just has the default material on it. We need something that obviously looks like dirt. So let's go to our hyper shade. I'm going to move this over to the side. We could close this tool settings window. Let's go to Windows, Rendering Editors, Hyper Shade. So we left off with our leaf surface, so we could clear this out, hit the little sparkle button right there, and to clear the graph, and then let's go ahead and create, right click, go create node, Arnold, same drill, AI standard surface. We're going to close this, we don't need that right now. Let's zoom out on this. Let's name this dirt surface to start with. And let's see if there's any presets that might work well for dirt. So I'm just going to click that, go over here to presets. Let's see, let's see, anything that might work well. I'm curious what velvet looks like. And I'm thinking velvet because of the way the light, like the shine on velvet. I'm curious what that looks like. So let's hit replace with velvet. And let's select our dirt in the viewport here. And let's right click on dirt surface and hit assign material to viewport selection. Again, if it's not letting you do that, that's really cool. It actually looks like velvet for sure. If it's not letting you do that, you have to like middle mouse wheel and just zoom in and out. Then you can right click on this and hit assign material to viewport selection. Yeah, I don't know if that velvet's working for what we want. It might, but I don't know if it's gonna be close enough. So let's go back to presets. And if you don't see the list, just click on this dirt surface here. Then you can click on presets. I think, what's foam look like? Let's hit replace. Yeah, let's just go back to the regular surface. I don't know if I could revert back. Let's just hit undo. So Z, got velvet, Z again. And now we're back to like that gray with the dirt surface. And I think we're not. Let me see, let me double check that. If I click the dirt, right click on here, gotta zoom in and out, right click, assign material to viewport selection. All right, so we're still on the velvet. Let's just delete this dirt surface. So I'm just gonna select both of these things and hit delete. This turns bright pink because there's no material. Let's just create another material, create node. Arnold, AI standard surface. We could close this. Let's select our dirt, right click on here, assign that to the selection. So now we're back to where we need to be. Let's call this dirt surface. And let's do a Control S to save. So the first thing we need to do is I have an image of dirt. So let me, if I go to Photoshop and I go to File, Open, and you don't have Photoshop on your box, but I just want to show you this image. If I go to my, where is it? Intro to CG, week 4. And there's this coast sand folder. So I'm going to click that. There's this texture folder in there. And then there's this coast sand 2 DIFF 4K JPEG. That stands for diffuse. Now diffuse is another word for like a color map in 3D. So I'm going to open that. Where is it? I'm going to continue. Okay, so this is basically a picture that somebody took that's 4K, and we're going to map it onto our dirt geometry. And there's also another image we're going to use from here too. So we're not only going to use the color map, we're also going to use a displacement map. So if I go to open and I pick on Coast Sand 2 DISP for displacement, the PNG, and I open that, we have this black and white map. So the way this works is anything that's black is going to be kind of bumped, like pushed down, and anything that's white is going to be pulled up. So like you see like where this like little pebble is or whatever that is, it's white, so it's going to bump out of our geometry. So you'll see that in a second. So let's go to Maya, and we're in our little workspace. We have our dirt surface. I'm just moving these both these things over to the side because I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to right click and go create node, and I want to go to 2D textures because we want to do an image, and we're going to do a file, and we did this for the background on our sky dome. So this we're just doing a different way here. So we're going to click on file, and nothing really changes. We get this little file node, so we could close this. So now we could go back to our hypershade and click on this little file node, and now in the little attribute editor section of the hypershade, we could click on the little folder icon, and we could go to that Coast Sand 2 folder, go to textures, and let's pick on that 4K diffuse map, the JPEG. So Coast Sand 2 DIFF 4K.jpg. So that's that image. We're going to hit open. Nothing changes yet. But now if I zoom in on this a little bit and kind of use my alt middle mouse to kind of pan over, we can see we have our base color channel. So that's what we would need to change the color on. So we need to take our out color. So if I click on this little circle from out color, we get this little connection. It's like, think of it as like a wire. We want to plug that into base color on our dirt surface and let go. Now our image is mapped to our dirt, so that we could actually zoom in on this a little bit more. And you can see after it renders, you can see all the little details and the little pebbles, and it's still kind of chunking away. You see this little progress bar at the very bottom. So if yours is blurry, you have to wait until it's finished. So you can kind of see all the little details in here. Cool, so now we want to add that displacement map to make some bumps on this thing, so it's not just like this flat wavy surface. So let's zoom out again, and we're going to create another file texture. So let's again right click in here. Let's zoom out a little bit, middle mouse wheel to zoom in and out, and kind of pan down. Let's right click here and go create node. Again, we're going to do a 2D texture, a file. Now we could close this again. So for this file, we could select it. We want to pick that black and white displacement image. So let's pick this file 3. Oops. And in the right side here in the attribute editor, click on this little folder. And let's pick, again, go into that Coast Sand folder, textures. Let's pick the Coast Sand 2 DISP for displacement. Let's do the PNG. That's this black and white, looks like outer space file. Let's open that. Again, nothing's happened yet because we haven't hooked it up yet. And the place where we need to hook this into is not on the material, but the shading group where it says displacement shader. So I'm going to go from the out color of this file 3. So out color, click on that little dot, drag your connection, and drag it to where it says displacement shader. We make that connection. Now the dirt in our scene goes way out of whack. Like if I zoom out, we can kind of see what's happening with it. That black and white image is deforming our surface, and it's making bumps and dips, but they're way too big and there's not enough detail. So let's figure out how to make them smaller and add more detail. So let's click on the actual geometry of the dirt and then hit Control A to go to your attribute editor. Now if you're on the dirt tab, again, that's the transform, and that's just the positioning, rotate, and scale information. If I click on dirt shape, we could go up under yours might look like this. You click on next where it says Arnold. It opens the Arnold section. We're going to scroll down. Let's first change the subdivision. So we want the renderer to actually subdivide this a lot more. So let's hit Cat Clark again. That's short for Catmull Clark. So now we're starting to see more detail, but it's still too big and it's still not enough detail. So let's change the iterations. And this is how many times it's going to subdivide and smooth this mesh. So let's change it to like 3. Enter. So now we're seeing a lot more detail, but it's still way too big. So underneath this section, if you go to displacement attributes, we could change the height of the displacement. So let's put it like at 0.1. It's still a lot better, but let's zoom in on that. So you can see we're getting like these little bumps. They're still kind of way too big, and our material is just too shiny. But let's change this to like 0.02. That's too small, so let's do like 0.05. So we're getting to see some little bumps. We're not like going crazy. I think that's probably pretty close to a good height level. I mean, if you want to start nitpicking, maybe like 0.04 might be a little bit better, but I think that range is good. But now our material is too shiny. It looks almost like wet, something wet on there. So let's close our attribute editor, go back to the hyper shade. Let's click on the dirt surface, and let's in this little attribute editor section under specular, there's this roughness slider. So we want to turn that roughness up. We don't want it to be so shiny. Let's turn the roughness up quite a bit, and let's turn the weight of so what specular is, it's the little highlight from light. So if I turn the roughness like down to like 0 or near 0, it's very shiny, like it's wet. We get these really tight specular highlights. And if we drag it to be really rough, and you can even see it in the preview up here, you get this kind of really soft specular highlight. And then we can just turn the weight down to, we don't want it to be so bright. So my roughness is like 0.8 and my weight is like 0.2, and I think that looks pretty good for like what we're going after. And again, it's still rendering. This little progress bar is still going. And as it renders, it gets more and more detailed. You can see this little areas of detail popping out. So let's zoom out on that, and let's kind of see what effect we have here. And, it's still rendering, and then we were done, and then we could kind of pan around and see how it's looking. I think that's looking pretty good for like some sand or dirt. Get some little bumps and rocks in there. We got our bottle. The last thing I want to show you guys is how to map. Let's say we want our mug to say something on the side of it, right? Let's go ahead and save our scene before we do anything. And let's go to, I have this image in Photoshop. Let me see if I have it open. Where is it? I don't think I have it open. Let me open it. So let's go to week 4 folder. So I have this, where is it? I should have it in here. Mug texture PNG. So all it says is, do you even animate, bro? I'm pretty proud of myself for that. But probably not that funny. But let's go back to Maya. It's just me being nerdy. So yeah, now we want to map that onto the side of this mug, make it look a little bit cooler. So what we need to do is go back to our mug shader. So let's clear our workspace. If you remember, the mug shader was the ceramic one. So we could just middle mouse drag our ceramic shader back into our workspace. And we need to put an image into this base color. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's create a file. So go create, right click, go to create node. Click Arnold, and then click on, oh, I'm sorry, not Arnold, click on 2D textures, and then click on file. So that creates this file here. You close this, and we want to click on that file, and then over on the right, in our hypershade, click on that little folder, and we want to pick that mug texture.png and hit open. So we see it here, but it's not connected to our mug yet. So let's do our out color and connect it to the base color of our ceramic surface. So let's zoom in and see what's happening on that mug, because it looks like it's pretty messed up. So I'm just gonna kind of pan around to like a bright side. So you can see it's on there, but it's like stretching really weird. It's not really matching where we want to put it. So we need to make some coordinates on this surface to tell Maya how this image wraps around this surface. So the way we do that, it's called UVs. So if you think of XYZ space as 3D space, UV space is just a term that 3D artists use for 2D space. So if I select my mug and I go up to the top, we need to be in the modeling subsection of Maya. So on the left, let's say if you're in animation, you won't see that UV menu, but if you click up here and then go to modeling, now I see this little UV menu. So we click that, we go to UV editor. In here, we could see we have our texture. Actually, I'm not seeing the wireframe of our mug. I'm not sure why that's happening. Let me click something else, like the bottle. Click back on the mug. Here we go. So it's kind of hard to tell. If I go to view, let's turn off, I think I could turn off the image. Oh yeah, so go to image and go to display, turn that off. So you can see like a 2D version of our mug is like these weird shapes. Maya doesn't know how to unwrap that mug and make it into a 2D surface, so we need to tell it how to do that. So let's leave that like that. Again, that is if you're under the modeling section of Maya, go to UV editor, and I went to image and I turned off the to display the image of the texture, because it makes it hard to see the model, the 2D version of the model. So I'm going to turn that image back off. So we need to tell Maya how to unwrap that mug and kind of spread it flat so we could make that image line up with its wireframe the right way. That's called UV coordinates. So if we still have our, where's my mouse? My mouse disappeared. My mouse die? Nope, there it is. We have our mug selected. We could go up to UV and go to cylindrical. So I think there's different ways to unwrap this. We could do a planar kind of projection, a spherical. Let's do it, because a mug is a cylindrical shape. So let's click cylindrical. And you can see it already starts to unwrap that mug, but it's still not what we need. If you're in your viewport, you could kind of tumble around. If you click off of it, it's okay. But what we want to do is click back on that mug, and we see this this is like a manipulator for that cylindrical projection. And you can see already in the animation I'm sorry, in the render view, it's starting to look a little bit better, but we want this cylindrical projection to be kind of centered on our mug. Right now it's kind of taking the handle into account. We just want it to be centered on this middle part, the main part of the mug. So if you rotate around and you click on this little cross section thing, a manipulator pops up. Let's say if you hit the Q button and that totally disappears, you're like, what do I do? On the left side, you can either hit this little axis thing here, or again, if I hit the Q and it disappears, the hotkey for that is T, and T gets the manipulator back up again. Again, we're going to click on that little red cross thing down here, and that makes a little move manipulator pop up. So I'm just going to center that on the actual body of the mug as best as I can. It doesn't have to be dead perfect, but it's just going to help us out. And then we can actually rotate that. If I click on, let's see, if I click that outer ring, rotation axes pop up. I want to actually just rotate on the green one. So click on that green one, and I want to spin this around so I start to see let's see, where do we want to see that text from? Maybe I want it to see it from this side, the bright side. So I'm going to rotate this so it's like that, and then we can actually move it down like that. It's still a little skewed. Let's actually move it back up here for a second so it's not so skewed. Oh, I think I rotated it by accident. We only want rotation on Y, so let's, in the channel box, just change this rotate X to 0 if you made the same mistake I did. That way it's not skewed, and then we want to just move it down. Kind of like that. But then we have a problem where if we rotate to this side, it's being projected straight through the cup onto this side as well. We don't want that. So now that we've kind of got the placement roughly where we want it, we could look in the UV editor. So again, go back to UV and go to UV editor. So this is kind of what our flattened out version of our mug looks like. It's a little bit weird. We actually need to cut this into 2 chunks. We don't want any of the texture on the inside. So let's zoom in on our mug. You could just pick the Q, the arrow tool if you want. Right click, go to edge mode. And you can see here's the seam of our UVs, like where the actual seam of our UV in the UV editor is. Hold down Option, just click and pan around to the top here. I'm going to, again, right click, make sure you're in edge mode. I'm going to turn off soft selection, so hit B to turn that off. Just double click one of these top rings, and it selects that whole ring of edges. Then I could go into my UV view and go to cut and sew and go to split. So what that did is it made the inside of our mug its own set of UVs and the outside its own set. So now if I go in here and right click in here and go to UV, so it's almost like picking vertices, but they're the UVs. If I move this in here, it'll move it in 2D space but not in this 3D space. Once we right click and pick a UV, right click and go to UV, pick any UV like this until it turns green. Hold down Control, right click, and go to UV shell. So that selects this whole shell of the UVs. Now if I move this out of the way, you can see it only selects the outer part, because there's the inner part and there's the outer part, but they're right on top of each other. So let's move that outer part down, and I think we're seeing another object behind here. Yeah, we're seeing, if I right click and go to object mode, click just the mug. We had the plank behind it also selected, so just click the mug. So now you can see what's going on here. And if I go back to image and turn back on display, we're in the UV editor. We want all this stuff to line up right on top of this. So we basically need to scale this stuff down. So let's right click, go to UV, and you can either just draw a box just to get this top section of UVs, or you can just pick like one UV and right click and hold down Control, right click and go to UV shell and hit R to scale it, and scale just this like part here. And let's see kind of what that did. Probably made it a lot bigger in our render view. So I'm just gonna come over here and pan around. Okay, we got that. We want this all to kind of fit within this square, so we need to scale this even smaller and hit the move tool and move it over pretty close to fitting in that square, and then just select this box or this UV. We don't want any text on this stuff, so we just need to make sure it's over top of this white area, so we could scale that down pretty small, move it up to something like this, and then we should be, let's see, it looks like, did we do the wrong part? I think I did the wrong part. I think we got the inside over top of the text and the outside is over here. So let's grab this shell, click a UV on this shell, hold down Control, right click and go to UV shell. Let's move this one down here, draw a box over this one and move it up. Yeah, now it's like really big. So let's scale this up a little bit. So what's happening is like this "Do you even animate, bro" image is just repeating over and over again throughout this like black area. So that's why I want to get this one here and move it and stick it on top of roughly that area. We could scale that part down and just kind of stick it on this bottom part, so it's not, because if I put it down here, this "Do you even animate, bro" is also down here because it repeats. But so if I stick it here, it won't catch that. And we can make this maybe a little bit bigger. Just pick some UV points, hold down Control, right click, go to UV shell, and just kind of let's scale these up a little bit there. And it's in the black a little bit, but I think it should be okay, because down here when there's a repeating one up top, this is all white, so I think that should be all right. So I think we're good there. So let's close the UV texture editor. Let's right click, go back to object mode. Let's save our scene. So let's take a look at this, and we have all this construction history on that mug because we did all those UV edits. So let's go to edit, delete by type, and delete history. So now we could close all these extra windows. We could kind of just come out and look at our scene, and I think that's pretty much it for this lesson. Go ahead and play around with the stuff I showed you, and next week we'll get into some rigging, which will take some character geometry, and we'll place some bones and joints, and we'll show you how to move them around. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this one. I think it's pretty cool to be able to take some 3D geometry and make it look somewhat realistic. You know, if you spent more time, obviously you could make it look super realistic, but yep, that's it for rendering. Thanks guys.